Hello there guys, Hirosaki here. This story is all about what if Naruto was a lost soul. The eve after Kyuubi's attack, Konoha is low on strength. The council agrees to turn Naruto into a living weapon. But years later, after Sarutobi's death, will Konoha's weapon continue to defend it? Or will he poise his blade to carve out their throats? Please like and subscribe to this channel before we begin, and check the description box for the author of this great storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 19, Akatsuki. Naruto looked from one end of the hallway to the other. Itachi and Kisame stared back at his red and black form, one apathetic, the other with blood-lusting excitement. Two of the most feared S-class criminals in the known shinobi world in my office. He mused aloud before looking at their attire. Ah, I see. So, the reports are true then. He mused calmly before looking at the Uchiha. There really is an organization after the Bijou. Itachi stepped forward. Uzumaki Naruto. He looked around the office before looking back at him. I see you have become rather important in my absence, demon of Konoha. Naruto said nothing, he merely continued to stare at the Uchiha with his cold blue eyes. The murderous prodigy spoke again. You know why we're here. He stated simply. Kisame picked it up where he let off. So, we can do this the easy way or... He grinned and placed a hand on Samahida's hilt. My way. Naruto turned his eyes to the second Akatsuki member, and with speed Kisame barely caught the ninja, had closed half the distance between them with one sword already ready to swing. Itachi's first instinct was to use a fire jutsu, but the problem was A, they couldn't attract too much attention, and B, Kisame was in the way. So, he unsheathed a wakizashi on his back and rushed forward intent on catching up to the youth. Kisame knew he wouldn't be able to unsheath Samahida in time to block, and so he placed his forearm in the way. Naruto's blade dug deeply into his skin, stopping at the bone. Kisame curled his lip, but showed no signs of pain. His other hand was already in a motion to cleave him with Samahida. Naruto stepped back with one leg, managing to do so in time to dodge Samahida as it came down. Wooden splinters flew as the blade hit the ground. Naruto held his blade firmly in Kisame's forearm and used his free hand, delivering two quick punches to the shark's face. He pulled his hand back, and in one smooth motion he unsheathed his second scimitar, gripping the weapon in a reverse grip. A clang was heard as Itachi's wakizashi hit his blade. He pushed the blade up and swiped at the Uchiha's legs. Itachi leapt up and threw a kick at the blonde's face. Naruto leaned his head forward, dodging the kick. He then raised his blade again and hit the back of Itachi's knee with the hilt of the blade. Itachi gritted his teeth against the pain. The impact put him parallel to the ground, still in midair. Naruto then raised his leg and moved to kick him in the chest with an axe kick. Itachi caught the attack, using it to pivot himself in an awkward backflip, up, over the leg, and landing on his feet. Naruto then wrenched his other blade free from Kisame's forearm, and leapt up just seconds before Kisame's took a horizontal swing that would have cut him in half. He stuck to the roof with chakra and crisscrossed his blades to block a vertical strike from the fish-like Akatsuki member. He felt the ceiling buckle slightly beneath his feet at Kisame's raw strength. He turned and blocked another strike from Itachi, twisting the blade around. He made an opening in Itachi's stance and took it. His scimitar entered the Uchiha's stomach just as he burst into ravens, which scattered black feathers all over the place. He pushed his blade down and leapt off the roof as dozens of kunai, thrown by the Uchiha, hit the spot he had previously been occupying. As soon as he landed, he was forced to block Kisame's Samahida again as he swung. Even so, the force of the blow sent him crashing through the wall into the other room. Kisame went to follow, but as soon as Naruto saw his figure through the newly made hole, he catapulted back out, slamming into the blue-skinned man with a very hard shoulder tackle that sent Kisame through the opposite wall. He turned and again blocked Itachi's strike with one of his blades. He used the other to take a swipe at him, but Itachi managed to block that with his wakizashi. Naruto continued to attack, his moves fast and precise, a flurry of metal and sparks was all normal individuals could see. Slash marks were formed throughout the length of the hallway as the exchange continued, eventually leading back into the office. Now with more space to maneuver, Itachi could get a breather. He sidestepped as Naruto came in with a downward swing, slicing his own desk in half in the process. Itachi appeared again behind him, stabbing him in the back, the wakizashi blade poking out of his chest. He growled low in his chest and delivered a hard elbow right into Itachi's gut, then raising his fist up, punched him dead in the face. Itachi recoiled from the blow, but managed to twist the blade and pull it out. Naruto turned and delivered a brutal kick to the Uchiha's gut, sending him clear across the hallway, down to the reception desk. Naruto threw his swords, stabbing them in the floor about 2 inches deep. He then made some fast hand seals and let his arm fall to his side, where 4 large snakes came from each of his sleeves. Thrusting his hands forward, the reptiles practically flew down the hallway, streaking towards the Uchiha prodigy. Itachi threw several kunai and shuriken towards the approaching reptiles, but they nearly twisted themselves out of the way, hissing as they continued their charge. Itachi muttered a curse under his breath, and let his eyes shift to the form of the Mangekyo. Amaterasu. Black flames exploded from his eye sockets, streaking down the hallway. The wood withered and burst into flames as the black fire passed over it, incinerating the snakes and instantly turning them into ash. Naruto released the jutsu on his snakes and grabbed the 2 swords stabbed into the ground at either side of him. Picking them up, he focused both wind and fire chakra into each one of the blades. Katan, Daibakoha no Tate. Fire release, great exploding wall. Flames came from his blades, the heat making the papers in the office behind him combust. Due to the compressed space, the wall of flames extended down the hallway, forming a virtual pillar of fire that headed for the Amaterasu. The 2 attacks met with an explosion that seemed to rock the whole tower. Naruto's flames offered resistance for a few moments before they gave way to the power of Amaterasu. Itachi covered his yes as the explosion momentarily blinded him. When the explosion finally died down, he looked and saw the entire hallway was in ruins. He was about to step forward when the ceiling behind him exploded in a shower of splinters. He spun around just as a clawed gauntlet caught him by the throat, bringing him down and pinning him against the floor. Itachi leaned his head to the side, barely avoiding the sword that stabbed itself where his forehead once was. He lifted his leg and kicked Naruto in the back, making him roll forward. Itachi got to his feet and turned, his sword already swinging. Naruto caught the blade with his metal gauntlet and pushed it down with his left hand. With the sword in his right, he took a quick stabbing motion to Itachi's face, making the Uchiha prodigy lean to the side. He pulled back and stabbed again, making Itachi lean to the other side. They continued this for a few moments before Naruto swung horizontally. Itachi ducked under the swing, still keeping a firm grip on his wakizashi, before he delivered a powerful punch to Naruto's gut, making him hunch over slightly. The Uchiha then stood up and delivered a strong knee to the boy's face, sending the blonde Jinchuriki reeling from the blow. Itachi then grabbed him by the throat and forced him to look at him dead in the eye. Tsukiyomi. Itachi was the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, often being hailed as the one stronger than the legendary Sannin, and was the first person to wield the power of a Mangekyo Sharingan in well over a century, also knowing more ninjutsu than even Hitaki Kakashi. So, it was no real surprise when the Uchiha knew for a fact that the second he entered the world of the Tsukiyomi that something was not right. He didn't know what gave it away, perhaps because the world was not responding to his commands, perhaps because he couldn't feel the mental link he possessed which allowed him to control the illusion, or perhaps it was the fact that instead of facing normal Naruto, he was facing a much more sinister version of the blonde. Naruto's grin widened to almost insane proportions as he raised his claws. So, this is the entertainment my container has provided me with. The Naruto chuckled to himself, his red eyes glinting in the shadows of the Tsukiyomi. Itachi suddenly knew who he was facing. The Kyuubi. The legendary demon chuckled as its grin widened. It flexed its razor-sharp claws and spoke calmly. "Come boy, if you can provide me some good entertainment, then I will let you leave." Itachi narrowed his eyes. He knew the chances of him beating the great demon in anything, even in the world of his Tsukiyomi, were very very slim. So, he had no choice other than to play along, since dispelling the technique didn't seem to be working. He rushed forward to the kitsune at incredible speeds, his wakizashi glinting eerily in the red lights of the Tsukiyomi. He swung with a downwards, diagonal swipe, but the kitsune fluidly moved out of the way. Itachi looked behind him to see the grinning fox floating back. Itachi spun on his heel and rushed forward. However, instead of attacking with the wakizashi directly, he threw the weapon at his red-eyed opponent. Kyuubi swerved to the side, his smile still firmly in place. Itachi appeared in front of the kitsune and plunged a kunai in his right collarbone and twisted it savagely. Kyuubi kept on smiling even as blood escaped the corner of his mouth. He grabbed the uchi's forearm, holding him in place and digging his sharp claws deep into the flesh. A bright red fireball formed on the kitsune's free hand, and he slammed it into Itachi's chest, sending the Uchiha prodigy flying back. Itachi coughed up blood and clutched his chest in pain, but quickly ignored it and righted himself in midair, rushing back at the kitsune with almost desperate fervor as he took out 2 kunai and engaged in taijutsu. Claws and metal met in furious and bloody slashes. Itachi did the best he could, but still received terrible lacerations along his forearms, his left hip, right shoulder clear across his stomach and down from the left side of his chest down to his lower right ribs. With the use of the Sharingan he managed to catch a view of an opening, and seized it, shoving the kitsune away with a harsh kick that connected to the red-eyed devil's face. The kitsune's back hit a tree within the illusion world. Itachi rushed forward and with blinding speed he plunged 2 kunai into the kitsune's palms, running them straight through and stabbing them deep into the bark of the tree, effectively nailing him there. Itachi pulled back and scowled as he saw the kitsune's infuriating smile was still there, annoying the fuck out of him. 6 kunai were gripped in each hand. He let a smirk cross his lips before he threw them all, hitting the kitsune in every major vein and artery in the human, upper torso anatomy, including both lungs, liver, kidneys, heart, stomach and throat. He was still smiling. Itachi scowled as he saw the form chuckling softly, the rise and fall of his shoulders evident from a distance. He walked over to his discarded wakizashi and gripped it firmly before walking over to the kitsune. He stared straight into the animalistic slits that were dancing with sick glee before swiping the great demon's head clean off, blood left as if it was a fountain. Itachi let his eyes follow the head before he spun and kicked it as it fell, sending it to another tree, his wakizashi following shortly behind, plunging into the kitsune's skull. He was still smiling. Itachi resisted the urge to shudder. Turning his back on the corpse he began focusing on dispelling his technique. It didn't work. The tiny hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he heard a chuckle coming from behind him. "Oh, but little Uchiha, I said that you could leave when I was done having my fun," came a very dark and demonic voice from all around him. Itachi spun around to where the corpse should have been. Note that the key word in that last sentence is should. Only his wakizashi and various kunai remained embedded in the trees. He turned back around and saw the red chakra forming a humanoid shape which quickly revealed the fanged grin and glowing red eyes, only this time they seemed much more demonic as they glowed with an unholy light. "And I'm not done having my fun yet." Itachi leapt back, in a somersault. Reaching his wakizashi he gripped it in a reverse grip and rushed the kitsune again. Kyuubi rushed forward as well, his claws flashing. They passed each other in an instant, appearing on the opposite sides of where they respectively were. Kyuubi straightened and smiled just before his arms fell off, cut cleanly from the body. Itachi looked over his shoulder and smirked himself, but it died as red chakra shot from the wounds and quickly regenerated the lost limbs. Kyuubi turned around, its unholy red eyes and gleaming fangs were the only things visible of its face. Looks like I failed that time. But don't worry little Uchiha, we still have 71 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds to go." Naruto, knowing that Itachi was currently trapped in a world of his own creation, reared back his blades in preparation to kill the murderous prodigy. Just then Kisame crashed through the wall in front of him to his left, Samahita already swinging, while his free hand grabbed Itachi and pulled him away. Naruto leapt over the blade in a cartwheel-like motion, landing on his feet. He backhanded Kisame in the face. Kisame snarled and caught his wrist before he pulled it back. He spun around, taking Naruto with him in the motion, and slammed him against the wall. Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. Kisame turned again and blocked the two blades that would have taken a chuck out of his ribcage. Pushing the blonde off, he then swung, aiming for the boy's upper torso. Naruto ducked, and then moved into Kisame's follow-up swing, close enough to render his large blade ineffective, and plunged his sword into Kisame's stomach. The shark man, however, had a slightly different anatomy than humans. The blade would have pierced his kidneys, causing a painful death, if he had been a normal human, but his kidneys were a bit higher than normal humans, and so, Naruto ended up not hitting anything vital. Kisame punched the blonde square in the face, sending him crashing into what remained of his desk. He was about to step forward, but then he heard a thud behind him. He turned and received the biggest shock of his life that night. Uchiha Itachi, the most feared missing nin alongside Orochimaru, was laying on the ground, blood seeping from his mouth. His pupils were dilated and the Sharingan slowly faded into black obsidian. The shark man sensed the approaching presences and knew this was one fight he couldn't win. He hoisted his partner over his shoulder, and both immediately vanished in red wisps of smoke. Naruto calmly walked out of the rubble, and took his blade from the floor, sheathing it. He rubbed his sore jaw and managed to turn his gaze into one of apathy just as the Umbu and Jounin entered the room. The masked individuals looked at the wrecked room and turned to their as of yet unofficial Hokage for an explanation. Naruto adjusted his jaw and spoke. "I want all Umbu search teams to comb the village. Your targets are two S-class criminals, Uchiha Itachi and Hoshikage Kisame. Capture alive if possible, if not dispose of them. He looked around the room once and get someone to clean this mess up." "Yes sir, right away." The Umbu captains saluted before they all vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto rubbed his forehead. He would definitely have to up the training programs. What good were the guards if they arrived after their leader was dead? Chapter 20, Akina. Flames. Deadly, purifying flames. She had been here before. That night at the Hyuga compound. Her mother, a woman she loved with all her heart. She didn't know what had happened. One moment they were simply talking, the next, fire. Fire came as if the gates of hell itself had opened, allowing them forth into the world of men. She didn't know what had happened next. It was all too fast. But she could remember. She was lying on the floor, blood covered her form, and her arm was throbbing with pain. She had looked up and her father along with her brother were fighting someone. She didn't see his face. Only the blood-red cloak that covered him. She stood, struggling against the pain that shot through her. She had started running towards them, her feet pounding against the moist earth. She ran as fast as she could, but the distance seemed endless. She remembered, hearing a muffled scream. The darkness in her vision faded and she saw the person in red, holding her brother by his face. She had heard her father yell out something, a curse most likely, but she didn't hear it. All she heard was the sickening crack of her brother's skull and the blood that she saw flow from both his left and right temples, down his face, his eyes, his ears, dripping down his chin to the cold floor below. She had seen red then. Her only thought was the objective: to kill the one in the red cloak. To stop the flames. She had rushed in then, and both her and her father fought with everything they had: kunai, blades, shuriken, explosive notes, jutsu, genjutsu. Everything they had in their arsenal. But it was over so quickly. She had felt a terrible pain across her stomach. When she looked down, she was kneeling and blood was traveling down her waist, to her knees, and into the floor, pooling where her knees met the floor. She clutched the bleeding injury with her hands, and looked up, as her father's body hit the floor with a dull thud. His eyes, panicked and fearful, turned themselves onto her, and he whispered one word. "Run." Before the blade pierced his neck. She looked up again and met the burning, blood-red eyes of that monster, and for the first time in a long time, felt true terror, a gripping fear that tightened around her chest and froze her in place. As their gaze did not break, her father's last word continued to scream in her mind. Run! 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 Run, 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 run. Finally, she did. She stood and she fled. As fast as her feet could carry her she fled, and the screams and cries of other ninja continued to reach her ears long after she flew from that place before finally fading into nothingness. But those eyes, those terrible crimson eyes of hell, that held within them the same glow of the burning flames around her, those stayed with her. And they would never fade. The young girl awoke painfully, much like the last 2 times she'd been conscious. Her mind was clouded, but she knew the surroundings were somewhat familiar, so she managed to stop her growing panic. She sat up weakly, vaguely recalling that it was much easier now than what she had remembered it to be the last time. She looked around, ignoring her blonde hair that fell over her eyes, obscuring her vision slightly. She found a black hired woman sleeping on a chair a few feet away, a book loosely held in her hand as her soft snores reached the girl's ears. The creak of a door opening startled her, and she turned to see a blonde-haired woman entering. She paused for a moment as their eyes locked before she made a gesture for her to keep quiet. She walked over to the sleeping brunette and removed the book from her slack grip. She set it on the table before picking her up and setting the girl down on the couch. Standing up, she walked over to her. Sitting at the edge of the bed, she looked to the younger blonde, with a look that managed to be somber, sympathetic and serious at the same time. "How do you feel?" Akina looked down. "Fine, I guess," she muttered. "Do you have pain anywhere?" Tsunade ached again. "Like your head, chest. Anywhere at all?" she ventured carefully. Akina shook her head slowly. "No." Tsunade nodded. From her body language and verbal responses, along with her injuries, it didn't take a genius to know she had been in a terrible fight, and had most likely lost someone important to her. "Would you like to get cleaned up?" "Yes, please," the younger girl responded. Tsunade nodded, helping her throw her feet over the edge of the bed. The girl tried to stand on her own, but her legs, after almost 2 days of pure abuse, and 1 more week of no use, made her limbs like jelly. Tsunade rushed forward and steadied her. "Whoa there, you can't be moving on your own yet," the older blonde said sympathetically, and placed a glowing green hand of chakra onto the girl's stomach as she saw her wince and instinctively place a hand over the area in pain. "Shizun told me your name's Akina. Is that right?" The girl, now identified as Akina, nodded. Tsunade smiled. "Good, my name, in case you didn't know, is Tsunade." Akina's head snapped up towards her, her crystalline blues widening in surprise. "Of the legendary Sannin?" Tsunade nodded and smiled before she slung the girl's arm over her shoulder and gently led her to the bathroom. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." It was only a few minutes later that Tsunade had the tub almost full with steaming hot water. She dipped her hand into the steaming liquid, testing the temperature. Really, I don't want to be a bother, I'll do it myself," the blonde girl stated meekly. Tsunade stood and dried her hands and walked over to the young girl. "Give me your hand," she said, extending her own hand. Akina promptly did the same. Tsunade gripped the younger girl's hand in her own. "Squeeze my hand as much as you can," she ordered firmly. The younger blonde tried, but she could barely clench her fingers. Tsunade spoke up again. "You've just woken up from an anesthesia-induced sleep, the effects still haven't worn off, you could trip and bash your head in there, so I'll help you until the muscle relaxants wear off. Don't worry, I've seen much worse bodies than yours," the older medic said with a sly grin. Akina blushed but nodded rather reluctantly, and began undressing, allowing Tsunade to help ease her into the shower. She hissed as the steaming liquid hit her stomach wound, which was now nothing more than a gash with dry blood and some signs of healing. It would definitely scar. She shoved her head down, wetting her hair before rising again. Tsunade sighed and sat down on a small stool. Listen, I don't want to sound too forward or anything, but the not knowing is killing me. I know you came from Konoha, your headband and ID identify you as a genin, graduated just 2 years ago. What happened? Did a mission go wrong or something? She shook her head. She really didn't want to talk about it, but another part of her wanted to say everything. She then remembered that was Tsunade, one of the legendary Sannin. She hugs her head, letting her now wet mop of blonde hair obscure her eyes from view. I don't really know all the specifics. All I know is that things started getting crazy after the Chunin exam. Tsunade listened through the story with bated breath. Many of the things she had just heard just threw her for a loop. Both Sarutobi and Orochimaru were dead. A kid, the alleged Kyuubi container and Konoha's own personal demon on a leash, had overthrown the council, and nearly half of her home village's population was either dead, Kia, or missing Nin. And her last remaining teammate Jiraiya had helped in this? This was just too much. She shook her head and spoke. What will you do once you're healed? The girl tensed for a moment before speaking. Her voice was an angry whisper. I'm going to train. As long as it takes, I'll train until I'm strong enough, then, I'll kill him. Tsunade took a deep breath, closed her eyes and rinsed off the last of the soap on the younger girl's back before she moved to pick her up. Wait. Tsunade paused listening to her. I think I can do it on my own, she said slowly. Tsunade shook her head. The after effects would take another 2 or 3 hours to wee. She stopped as the girl's brow creased with effort as she used both her arms and her legs to stand up. Tsunade moved forward and helped her stand the rest of the way. But she knew something was up with that display. She never messed up dosages or medical times. The girl should be nothing more than a limp hunk of meat. She decided to store that in the back of her mind and began helping her to dress. When Tsunade emerged with Akina, Shizune was beginning to wake up. Oh my, I'm sorry Tsunade-sama, I didn't mean to fall asleep, she said, standing and bowing her head apologetically. It's all right Shizune, can you keep Akina company? I think I need to get some sake, the older woman said half-heartedly. Shizune nodded, immediately knowing that her master was distressed, and let her eyes travel to the younger girl. She could be no older than 13 or 14, her hair was a dark shade of blonde, and in a certain light could be seen as orange. It was somewhat spiky, with a few bangs over her eyes and the rest cropped back in a spiky ponytail. She was wearing a simple tank top now, with beige shorts and black ninja sandals. Shizune smiled at her, and she tried to smile back, but failed slightly. The brunette moved in, and helped lead the girl to the bed where she sat down with a pained grunt. Tsunade left them, she really needed a drink. Shizune smiled at the girl. Are you hungry, or thirsty Akina-san? She asked politely. Akina was about to say no, since she didn't really want to impose, but her stomach decided to speak for itself, letting out a very loud, very embarrassing growl. She blushed, her cheeks turning a healthy pink. Shizune laughed light-heartedly. I'll take that as a yes then. Akina smiled slightly and nodded, as long as she could distract herself. Shizune walked over to the kitchen and grabbed some half-warm takeout food, not exactly the healthiest choice, but it would get food into her stomach. Shizune walked over and handed the girl some of the leftover lo mein Tsunade hadn't finished the other day. Akina, despite the food being cold, practically inhaled it. Shizune blinked at the way the food simply vanished from the plate. She laughed somewhat awkwardly, but she was spared further speculation and embarrassment as Akina spoke up. Where did Tsunade-sama go? She asked, looking around. Shizune shrugged. Don't worry, Tsunade-senpai can handle herself. She may have gone to a bar or... Shizune suddenly paled and Akina immediately grew alarmed. Sejun-san. What's wrong? The next thing the blonde knew, a tornado had suddenly torn through the apartment building and Shizune was nowhere to be seen, only her voice could be heard in the wind. Getego. Akina blinked olishly at the spectacle. What? Seeing as how she was going to receive no answer, she decided to rest, but as soon as she let her lids fall over her eyes, those blood-red orbs flashed into view, and she sat straight up. She gulped down her fear, and immediately replaced it with anger and determination. She would get stronger. Naruto let a slow smile dance on his lips, as he read the reports from the Sound Five. They had returned with nearly double what he had asked for. Indeed, there were several that merely wanted to kill him, but Ibiki's cross-references had pointed them all out, and had them discreetly eliminated. Many of the senior Leafs, meaning the people that had been born and raised in the Leaf village, did not take kindly to the newcomers. Naruto now had Root Umbu patrolling the inside of the village to stop fights from breaking out. While they were few, he did not need the extra headache. While those new batch of Chunin and Jounin were getting settled, and another report had arrived. This was Kakashi and Anko's report of the Mist Village. And the intelligence was quite pleasing. He chuckled before clicking a button on his intercom. "Bring me Hatake Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, Aburin Shibi, and Hyuga Hinata." "Yes, Naruto-sama." Chapter 21, Plans for Kiri. Naruto shifted through more mission reports when one of the Hyuga who were working administration in the building walked in and bowed. "Naruto-sama, the ninja you requested have arrived." He nodded. "Good. Send them in." The Hyuga nodded and bowed again before walking out. Moments later, Kakashi, Kurenai, the Aburin clan head Shibi, and Hinata, clad in robes befitting her as the new matriarch, walked in. "Good, you're all here," he drawled, standing. "The reason I have called you all is because I have decided to begin the first stages of M plans. And the 4 of you are necessary for it. We will head to Kiri. If all goes according to plan, then the Mist Village will fall right into our hands without even a single battle between our forces." Everyone looked at each other incredulously, and were seriously considering that their leader had gone mad, but they had said the same thing when H proposed to attack the Hyuga compound on his own. So, they decided to grant him the benefit of the doubt. Shibi was the one to answer. "And how will you accomplish that, Naruto-sama?" "Kakashi, please explain the situation Kiri is in right now," Naruto commanded. The copy ninja straightened and spoke. "When we went to Kiri, Anko and I quickly learned the obvious. The place was practically in ruins, the Mizuki's forces on one side, and the remainder of the 7 swordsmen on the other. The war has been around for a few years now, so the civilians in that area are all either miserable or drafted into shinobi duty. While the 7 swordsmen have stronger troops, they have less resources and funds than the Mizuki, which has slowly been giving him the advantage. Right now, it looks as if in a few months' time the 7 swordsmen will be defeated. The shinobi on both sides are complacent. One side believes they should surrender instead of die needlessly, while the other side is sick and tired of the fighting." Naruto nodded. "We will use the complacency and civil unrest of the population to our advantage." As Kakashi stated, the side with the 7 swordsmen is losing simply because they have less resources from which to draw upon. "We will alleviate that problem." Shibi nodded. "I see. Then they will be in our debt." Naruto nodded. "We will provide them assistance. In exchange, they cannot name a Godame Mizuki, and instead they must name a Jounin Oyabun, much like Kusa and Aim. Our ninja will oversee operations there. The overseers, as they will be called, will consist of a team lead by a Jounin. They will be switched once every year, so they do not begin to feel too attached to the Kiri Nin, and the Kiri Jounin commander will hand them reports of the village situations once every 3 months. The overseers will also make sure there are no movements against us, especially not by the Jounin Oyabun." Kurenai spoke up now. "Naruto-sama, you cannot possibly believe that they will simply hand over control of their country. Even if they did, they would only bide their time to stab us in the back when their strength returns to them," she argued. Naruto nodded. "Both are good points. However, not every plan is without risks. This is simply the one with the least amount of long-term complications. Fighting a war with Kiri will diminish us to the point where we will not even be able to sustain ourselves, much less conquer the 4 shinobi villages. This will not only increase our influence in the south, it will also add to our income, manpower, and will grant us control of Kiri's powerful navy, which can only be rivaled by Kyuumo, and even then Kyuumo's is much smaller and less experienced. Shibi nodded. I see. But I am still confused. Kakashi and Kurenai's roles are already stated, but what possible benefit would my presence in Hinata-san's presence grant? You are for a much more practical use than Hinata, I admit. You are to use your entire hive of Kakachu and actively spy on the enemy, granting us intelligence at a very quick rate, defensive weak points, strong jounin locations, as well as where the Mizukage is at all times. And me? Hinata asked, ticked off that he had said she was not to be of practical use. While you will not be serving a practical use or combat use at this time, your use will be placed on your political value. Once we do this, word will spread, and word will reach the other ninja villages quite quickly. It will not be long before they also hear that the Hyuga clan head, Hayashi, is dead, and has been replaced by a girl no older than 13. Many will think that the Hyuga clan has grown weak and will therefore think that we are weak. By going on this mission, you will handle yourself as a clan head should and make the Kiri ninja believe that you are most certainly not weak. Which will reduce the likeliness that Kyuumo or IWA get any ideas of attacking. In order to make sure you are ready, I will grant you a signed leave of absence from active duty. Kakashi will train you in these 2 weeks before we depart. Hinata looked to Kakashi, who seemed a little surprised, but smiled at her nonetheless. Shibi spoke up next. Naruto-sama. I request to take another of my clan members on this mission. Which one and for what reasons? My son, Aburame Shino. I believe that he could use the experience this mission has to offer. While I can extend my Kakachu to cover most if not all of the village at one time, it takes a great amount of concentration. One that my son has never used before. You can think of this as somewhat of a training exercise for him. Naruto thought about it for a moment before he finally replied. Is your son at least shonen level in stealth on his own? Shibi paused before nodding. Yes. I believe he may even be a little above that if he tries hard and the conditions are right, he could even be considered high shonen. Naruto nodded before speaking again. Very well. Now, if no one else has any questions, then you may leave. Make preparations to depart in 17 days. Hinata, Kurenai and Shibi bowed and began leaving, Kakashi granting the Hyuga the time and place of where they would meet. After they had left, Kakashi turned to Naruto. What is it, Hatake? Naruto said, leaning back in his chair. You know, after you take Kiri, if you even get it, you can't just immediately go and attack another country. Do you take me for a fool, Hatake? Naruto scoffed. I must first stabilize my power in Kiri, and then gain the adequate number of troops, supplies, funds and resources before I begin another campaign. Besides, he looked out the balcony towards the marketplace where the people were going about their business. I know that a normal shinobi can only take so much combat before he finally snaps. He looked to the Sharingan wielder's eye. Isn't that what you were going to say? Kakashi leaned back in his own chair and sighed. Yeah. He looked to Naruto again. You say the words but you don't really understand them, do you? Naruto was silent for a long while before he spoke again. My entire life has been battle. I fought battle after battle until I was feared by all, as a devil in human form. He looked to Kakashi. Even you, to some degree, see me as a demon, don't you, Hatake? He smirked as Kakashi didn't answer. No, Kakashi, I do not understand. But perhaps that will change someday. He mused silently before standing and leaving his office. Minato-sensei. He mentally sighed. What have we done to your legacy? Meanwhile, in a dark lair, 7 robed figures gathered together. Are you serious? One voice, which belonged to a silver-haired man with a 3-bladed scythe and a Kyuumo forehead protector, asked incredulously. He actually beat the both of you? While also defeating Itachi's Tsukiyomi. Another voice, this one coming from a very tall man with pupilless eyes, a face mask and a bandana with the waterfall village symbol over his head. That is disturbing. Another, one with a scorpion tail and hunched form, spoke up. No, that's fucking hilarious, yeah. Another voice, this one coming from a blonde rock neen, snickered. Kisame growled. You wanna come down here and say that you clay using transvestite? He said as he moved to grab Samahita. You fish-faced freak. Deidara snarled, moving his hand to one of his pouches. Enough, both of you. A female voice spoke up, entering the room. She looked to the still silent leader. I have treated him. He will hopefully awaken in a few days' time. The leader nodded and turned to one member, which looked like a Venus flytrap. Zetsu. I want you to gather as much information as you can on the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. His strength is troubling, but nothing we cannot handle with the proper information. Zetsu bowed before speaking. Of course. He seemed to fade away as the leader turned to the rest of the group. This changes nothing. We will continue with our plans accordingly. Do not approach the Kyuubi Jinchuriki in open combat, unless the odds are very favorable. They each nodded before silently fading into the darkness. The leader let his eyes travel to the giant statue of a bound humanoid figure in silent contemplation. Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Will you be the one, I wonder? Will you be the one that brings this world into ruin? Tsunade was currently on her 9th bottle of sake, drunk as hell. She was drinking for a number of reasons. One was the death of her sensei, another was simply for the situation that had fallen over her home. Jiraiya was yet another reason. She felt sort of betrayed by him. How could he side with someone like Naruto? He couldn't possibly believe that he would succeed in his ambition, so there had to be another reason. Another major reason was that girl, Akina. She reminded Tsunade a little of herself back when she had lost Dan and Nawaki. Throughout her entire story, Tsunade felt the memories that she had long ago tried to bury resurface. In a nutshell, she could relate to the girl. And she hated it. Just as she was about to reach for the 10th bottle, a hand firmly grasped her wrist. You know, Haim. That's really bad for your health. She looked at the silver-haired man that stared at her with a neutral expression. Jiraiya. She glared. Chapter 22, Moving Forward. Naruto and his team of 5 jounin and 2 genin silently skulked through the shadows of the night near the hidden mist village. Kakashi was leading the team through the proper route, while Kurenai had placed a strong genjutsu over all of them to keep them hidden. Currently, everything was going according to plan. They had slipped past the border guards with little problem along with the troops belonging to the current Mizukage, and were near the main headquarters of the remaining 7 swordsmen. Kakashi suddenly had a strange thought occur to him. Naruto, who did you leave in charge of the village while we're gone? I remember that Jiraiya wasn't around. Naruto paused for a moment in his stride before continuing rather quickly. You need not worry, Kakashi, it is being handled accordingly. Kakashi shrugged, not giving it a second thought. If Naruto said it was being handled properly, then it was being handled properly. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, a certain purple-haired jounin growled low in her throat, her eyes flashing a gold yellow much like her old sensei as she glared at the pile of paperwork in front of her. Oh, that fucker was gonna pay for this. It wasn't long afterwards the Konoha nin could see a Japanese-style mansion at the top of some shrine-like steps. The shifting shadows and thick mist surrounding the area gave way that several jounin, which were adept at the silent killing technique, were currently present and on guard around the compound. Naruto gestured for his subordinates to come closer. Kurenai, drop your genjutsu, we've arrived. The secrecy was only needed so that the Mizukage would not catch wind of this. The genjutsu mistress hesitated for a moment before nodding, and the genjutsu around them fell. Naruto turned and began making his way up the steps of the shrine. It wasn't long before mist encircled around him and the 5 individuals behind him. He stopped as he reached the top of the stairs. The mist dissolved and roughly 24 ninja were now surrounding them. "What business do 6-leaf ninja have here in Kiri?" asked a large man as he stepped forward. He was about 5 feet 11 inches to 6 feet. He had a customized chest-plate armor with sleeves that were fit more as a priest's robe, dark blue in color, and baggy samurai-style pants. He had short straight hair, and a full beard and mustache. He also had 3 swords along his back, 2 crisscrossed and 1 going straight down along his spinal column. Naruto allowed his eyes to travel over the group of Kiri-nin before he spoke up again. "We have come to speak to the leader of this rebellion," he answered. The man that had approached them looked them over. "Your names?" he demanded. Naruto glanced back at Kakashi, gesturing to the silver-haired man. "Hatake Kakashi of Konoha, copy ninja." He looked to Shibi. Aburame Shibi and Aburame Shino, the clan head and heir of the Aburame clan respectively. He gestured to Kurenai. Yuhi Kurenai, the Genjutsu mistress. And finally, Hinata. Hyuga Hinata, the newly appointed clan head of the Hyuga clan. Mutters arose at that, whispers reached them, not the least of which boiled down to, "But she's just a kid." Throughout the small barrage of mutters and whispered disdain, Hinata forced herself to remain apathetic to the world. She would not respond to this simply because that is not how a clan head was supposed to act. Taunts can be ignored and you act only when there's no other choice. At least that's what she had been taught. The commander silenced them all with a harsh shout. "Shut it." He looked back at Naruto. "And you?" "Uzumaki Naruto." He paused, the word stuck on his tongue for an instant. "Godame Hokage of Konohagakure." Tsunade stared at her ex-teammate's looming form for several seconds before she was able to fully comprehend just who was standing before her. She glared and roughly pulled her hand away from his grasp. Bringing the sake bottle to her lips, she took a huge swig and slammed the rice wine on the table. "What are you doing here?" she snarled. Jiraiya ignored her harsh tone and calmly sat down, serving himself some sake and drinking. "I just came to talk," he said, placating. "About what? Making me join your little world-conquering club too?" she scoffed, taking another swing. Jiraiya paused before he drank some more sake. "So, you've heard, have you? I suppose that girl told you," he stated simply. The slug Sannin narrowed her eyes. "You've been spying on us?" It was no real secret what the Sannin had specialized in. Tsunade in medical techniques and taijutsu. Jiraiya in sealing techniques and summoning techniques that could be used in conjunction with ninjutsu, and Orochimaru in ninjutsu and kenjutsu. Out of all of them, Orochimaru was the best one in stealth, followed closely by Jiraiya, and then Tsunade. So, it was not too unbelievable that Jiraiya could remain hidden from her presence if he really wanted to. Jiraiya nodded to her question. "Yeah, I have." He looked at her then. "And as you've guessed, I did come here in hopes of you joining us." Her hand tightened around the bottle, and a small crack formed on it as it strained under the pressure. "How dare you?" she spat. "I have no real love for the Leaf Village. But you would burn it down, all in the name of this ridiculous notion of peace." Her glare was so intense Jiraiya thought that she would seriously lash out at him. After a moment or two she relaxed, if only slightly. "It won't work. And you disappoint me for thinking for a moment that it would. Get out." She turned her head, refusing to even look at him. Jiraiya stared at her with one of the most serious faces anyone had ever seen on his face. After a good long while he spoke. "I know that you don't really want to talk about the wars we fought, but I feel that this has to be said." He saw her tense and gripped the bottle again. One subject that was nearly taboo around Tsunade were the battles between Kiri and Iwa that killed her brother Nawaki and her ex-lover Dan respectively. But nevertheless, he continued on with a steady, even voice. "Think about it, Tsunade." Jiraiya pleaded again. "You and I know it better than anyone. First a war with Kiri, 15 years later a war with Iwa, then a minor skirmish with Kumo, and now a battle with Suna and Oto that took Sarutobi-sensei. No matter how many treaties, agreements, alliances and policies we make, they are a fragile alliance at best, which breaks almost every 2 decades and more innocents are lost. But this is something that can bring peace for far longer than just some signed treaty. And if we do things properly, perhaps even centuries of peace can be achieved. Just think of it, Tsunade. No one will ever again have to go through what you went through with Nawaki and Dan. He was using low blows to her defenses and he knew it, but as a man once said, the ends justify the means. Tsunade meanwhile felt some of her bitterness ebb away as the words reached her ears. She remembered the pain she went through at the loss of her brother. Her father had taken to the bottle, and her mother had fallen into a pit of despair. Both losing themselves in their respective pain. Her father, due to the newly developed addiction, fucked up on a mission. Next day, she gets a note, "No more dad." Her mother didn't take it well, and one day she went to sleep and simply didn't wake up. Then Dan had come. She had been burying herself into her work, devoting herself entirely into training in hopes of pushing the memories away from her mind. It had worked to some degree, but looking back at it now, she would have eventually snapped from the strain. He had arrived then, and had returned some light into the bleak world hers had become. Just when she was pulling herself out of her depression with Dan helping her, he had to go and die too. To think that should this boy succeed, that no one ever had to go through what she went through again, chipped away at her resolve. Jiraiya saw the small sliver of hopefulness in her eyes and hid a smirk of triumph. But soon her eyes grew guarded as a small voice made itself known in the back of her head. "What about that girl Akina? She's the same as you. She lost everything to him. And he'll do it to more people. She's just the first of many broken families. And in the end, it will all be for nothing because his ambition is completely impossible." Jiraiya noticed the change in her and stood, deciding to make a tactical retreat. "I'll give you 3 days to think it over, Tsunade." That said, he placed his money on the table and left the bar and his former teammate to the chilling night air. Naruto and the Konoha nin stood in a room with a large table in front of them. 4 Kiri nins were flanking them, 2 on each side with their commander standing along the opposite corner of the room. After a few minutes the sliding door directly in front of them opened, revealing a woman with messy, shoulder-length brown hair wearing white battle robes with a gold dragon around it and a strange symbol on her back. 2 short swords were strapped horizontally along the back of her waist. She had a silver tiara on her head replacing the forehead protector, and had the look of a seasoned war veteran even though she could not be older than her mid-30s. "Hidetada!" she barked out gruffly. "Who are these people?" The bearded man that had been leading them, Hidetada apparently, answered her. "This is apparently the Gandame Hokage and his personal escort." She looked immediately Naruto. Just by the way he looked at her, she could tell he, above the others, was probably the most dangerous. She raised an eyebrow. "The Gandame Hokage? I thought that old geezer the Sandaime was still in power. So, what happened? He kicked and the leaf didn't have anyone other than some brat to take his place." She snorted and then stared at the black void that shadowed his face with a dead serious expression. "What the hell are your leafs doing here?" she asked bluntly. Naruto spoke simply. "We have come here to negotiate with you." She crossed her arms in front of her chest. "About what?" Naruto decided that since she would skip the formalities, so would he. "Let us make things clear. You and I both know that without additional assistance you will lose this war against the current Mizukage. We are willing to provide the economic assistance you require." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "And what do you desire in exchange?" Naruto glanced around. "Let us speak in private." She paused for a moment before nodding, making a slight hand gesture. The Kiri nin filed out with the Konoha nin trailing behind them. When the door was closed and everyone was out of earshot, Naruto turned his icy blues onto the woman leading this rebellion. "As I stated before, We are willing to provide the resources necessary for you to gain an advantage in this conflict, and as you have guessed, we do have conditions, namely two. She nodded, telling him to continue. The first is quite simple, since your village will be of no use to me or my goals if you end up destroying your military force. I am to take full control of your troops. Excuse me? She said, half surprised, half outraged. She bared her teeth. Absolutely not. If you refuse, then I will merely walk away, and you will lose this war. Naruto stated simply. For him, there was no negotiation for this. For this served two purposes to him. The first was the reason he had stated to her. And as for the second, he needed the respect and fear of the general population of the Kirin. This was the quickest way to achieve either objective. She glared at him heatedly, her lips curled back in a sneer. She seemed to struggle with herself for a moment. In the end, she looked like she had just forced down a very nasty-looking and disgusting piece of meat before she slowly nodded. And the second condition is that once this war is over, you will hand over all matters concerning Kiri's economic and military institutions to me. There will be no Gondame Mizukage, and Kiri is to become a territory of Konoha. Her eyes widened in shock, and she replied without even thinking. Absolutely not. Naruto closed his eyes. He had been expecting that. A silence descended on them before she spoke. I will agree to the first term, but never the second. You will just have to renegotiate. Naruto let a slow smirk tug at his lips. She needed help and she knew it. Apparently, she was a good warrior, but a bad politician. She had already made the first mistake. No. He stated solemnly. My terms are completely non-negotiable. I am interested in Kiri for its naval ports. In its prime, Kiri easily dominated the entire Eastern Sea. Now there are various ways for me to go about this. You and the Mizukage are of very little consequence. This is the easiest course of action. However, since you are not interested, I will merely take my leave. That said, he turned and gripped the sliding door in preparation to leave when her voice, filled with veiled hate and resentment, reached his ears. Wait. His eyes flashed red as he allowed a slow smirk to cross his features. Chapter 23, Movements in Kiri. The air was cold and heavy with tension and the thick morning mist that blanketed the land of Kiri. As one pauses, a faint sound, so faint it is almost undetectable by human ears, could be heard through the fog. Several squads of Kiri ninja rushed through the forest, taking both the treetops and the forest floor. The commanding unit, an Umbu with a blue dolphin mask, stopped on one of the branches, letting his troops fall on ahead as his second-in-command landed next to him. He turned to the new arrival, signaling him to move on ahead with hand signals. The man nodded before continuing ahead. The commander placed 2 fingers over the two-way radio on his ear. Command, this is Advance Unit Alpha, we are re. He was cut off as a gauntlet-covered hand wrapped around his throat from behind, cutting off his oxygen and lifting him effortlessly from the ground. He tried to reach behind him to grasp the arm holding him, only to grasp air. Soon enough, a sickening crunch was heard along with a bloody gurgle before a body fell to the forest floor with a dull thud. Naruto observed the dead Umbu fall with cold apathy. His blue eyes slowly turned from his limp body to the retreating backs of the Kirin. He raised his two-way radio and spoke into it, waiting for them to step out of his sight. Proceed. Less than 3 seconds later, a great explosion blanketed the forest, where the ninja had vanished, with fire and ash. The harsh wind and dust hit him, ruffling his cloak and hair in the wind. Naruto-sama, are you all right? Came a static-filled voice from the radios. I am returning now, send the patrols. Kill any that survived. A pause. Of course, Naruto-sama. Temari sighed as she wiped her brow from the sweat that had formed there due to the heat of the Suna sun. It was abnormally hot today, even by Suna's standards. She glanced at the restaurant down the block and decided to make her way towards it. As she neared, voices began making their way toward her, escaping the wooden walls of the stand. She faintly recognized them. It was only a second or so before she entered the stall that she was able to put a face to them. Inside were the 5 genin of Konoha. "So, Sakura, what have you been up to lately?" Kiba asked, wolfing down some barbecued chicken as he looked to his former teammate. She shrugged. "Nothing much, I've been volunteering at the hospital, and one of the older medics there, a retired mednin named Chio, is helping me learn some new med techniques." Kiba nodded. "That's cool." He looked at Choji, Ino and Shikamaru. "What about you guys?" Shikamaru shrugged. "We've mainly been training with our family scrolls, with one of the jounin that came with us." He chose his words carefully, seeing his teammates hide their respective flinches. Choji ate some more barbecue as he spoke. "Yeah, I've already gotten the hang of 2 more jutsu. He looked to Ino. "How about you, Ino?" She smiled, while she was still rather subdued in comparison to what she was back in Konoha. Slowly she was regaining her former spunk. "I've mastered one and begun to master my dad's mind scramble technique. He invented it and left some pretty good notes, so it's pretty easy." Choji smiled and nodded as Sakura gave them both a pat on the back, since she was pretty much sitting in between them. Kiba smirked. "Yeah, that's cool. My sis has been training with me, but since she's the oldest, she's had to take over the clan duties. She's been meeting a lot recently with the Suna Council, won't tell me why though." He shrugged as an afterthought. "She's been wanting to get you guys a secure Suna citizenship," Temari said from her table across from them. Each of the Konoha genin turned to face her. "Ha, hey wait, you're that Suna chick," Kiba said bluntly, making Sakura hit him over the head for his disrespect. "Sorry, Temari-san, my teammate here needs a lesson in manners," Sakura said, glaring at him from the corner of her eye. Temari waved her off. "Cut the formalities. Anyway, like I said, your sister's been trying to secure you a Suna citizenship." "Why would she do that?" Choji asked, swallowing a mouthful of food. "Because she knows that if any Konoha ninja comes searching for you, then we'll have no choice but to hand you over," came a new voice entering the stand, making everyone turn to see Gaara walking in and sitting down next to Temari. He looked back to them, his sea green eyes blank and expressionless. "As of right now, Suna has absolutely no custody over you, and despite the fact that our standing with Konoha is less than favorable since Orochimaru tricked us into attacking the Leaf during the Chunin exams, harboring you while you do not have Suna citizenship will work just as well as an open declaration of war, and informing him falsely of your whereabouts will allow them a wide opening to spread propaganda against us to the other villages. Should that happen and we would seek an alliance with another village, chances are they won't even touch us if word like that got out." Kiba stood up, glaring angrily at the Kazekage. "What? Our parents gave everything they possibly could to get us away from that bastard, and you just sell us out if he comes knocking at your door." "Calm yourself, Inuzuka." Gaara spoke to the raging boy. "I only said it is a possibility, and it is the truth. While I would like to grant you citizenship, I have very little say in the matter since the council are the ones that mainly deal with civilian matters." Kiba glared but huffed and looked away. "Of course, you have very little say. You're just a genin. Actually." Temari spoke, getting sick of Kiba's attitude. "He's going to be taking the title of Kazekage in 2 weeks. The blood drained from Kiba's face as the entire group of former Leaf genins glared at him. Shikamaru looked to the Kazekage. "So, are you willing to give us the citizenship?" Gaara took a sip of the herbal tea they had just served him before he spoke. "At the moment, I am undecided. On one hand, adding the famous Inoshikacho clans to our village would be a great asset, as well as the fact that Chio has reported Miss Haruno here having a rather rare talent for medical ninjutsu, and the Inuzuka clan abilities cannot be underestimated either. All of these could add great strength and prestige to our village. But," Shikamaru continued, "you're not sure if you can risk open war over this, especially not with this demon of Konoha character." Gaara nodded silently, sipping some more tea. Indeed. He looked to Shikamaru as he spoke again. This, Uzumaki, is not someone I would like to count as one of my enemies. You'd prefer to have him as an ally. Shikamaru stated simply. Gaara sipped his tea, his whispered words not reaching anyone but Temari next to him. No, that I would want even less. The Shuji screen door slid open, silencing the occupants on the other side as Naruto stepped in. His red eyes scanned the room. The scrolls, maps and other documents were littered over a table in the center of the room. Shibi and Shino sat out in the balcony in meditative positions as they listened to the messages their respective hives of Kakashi relayed back to them, and then they relayed the messages to the Chunin couriers, who then relayed it to either Kakashi, Kurenai, Hinata, the Kiri woman, Mitsuko Jinchiko, or her second-in-command, Hidetada, and then they would relay it to him. That was quite an intricate and, on normal circumstances, quite foolish, but this, as many things he did, served a purpose. While Shino and Shibi both had the majority of their respective hives sweeping the enemy's camps and headquarters gathering information, a small portion of each of their hives were crawling around this very base and listening in on conversations the Kiri-nin might be having that would indicate a conspiracy against him. So far, there were only two individuals of any real importance. Jinchiko and Hidetada, the two most powerful of the remaining four swordsmen. If he could eliminate one or the other, then neither would ever really have the strength, politically or physically, to defeat him. He just had to do it, quietly. The other two remaining swordsmen, a man named Guan Suo, and his apprentice, an aggressive girl, worthy of Zabuza, named Tachibana Mika, were not on good terms with either Jinchiko or Hidetada, and while they did not particularly like his takeover, they were mainly keeping to themselves, leaving Jinchiko and Hidetada to conspire and fend for themselves. So, the next order of business was to eliminate either Jinchiko or Hidetada. Now then, how to do it? Naruto-sama. The blonde-haired youth turned and found Shibi. The Aburame clan head looked emotionless as usual, but by his body language Naruto could tell he was anxious, which was alarming in and of itself. What is it, Shibi? He spoke, rounding in order to face him fully. I believe this information you may want to hear yourself before it reaches the other's ears. He placed a hand on the blonde's shoulder and leaned in, whispering the information into his ear. As Shibi pulled back, he could swear Naruto was smirking beneath his mask. Thank you, Shibi, you may return to your duty. The Aburame clan head bowed before he turned and left. Naruto turned to one of the Kiri ninja in the room and spoke. You there, bring me Jinchiko, Hidetada, Guan, his apprentice Mika and Hyuga Hinata now. They are needed. The Chunin hastily bowed. Yes, Naruto-sama. Before he scurried away. Chapter 24, Tsunade's Decision and the Double Cross. Naruto calmly moved a branch out of his line of sight, so he could look out into the small clearing where his targets would pass. Behind him, Jinchiko, Hidetada, Hinata, Guan, Mika and Shino, who had requested to join in this mission, rested, along with a squad of over 30 Kiri Jounin. Guan was a large man, with a large but well-groomed mustache and goatee. He wielded a single, two-edged broadsword. He had a height of about 6 feet, wore green battle robes with steel chest armor over it, which was painted green and engraved with gold flame-like designs. He had long black hair which was held in a top knot. His apprentice Mika was the exact opposite, whereas his appearance could be considered a large tiger, hers was a small swan. She couldn't be any bigger than 5'3", rather lithe and agile-looking. She wore a blue shirt which left her belly exposed, her pants were also blue and somewhat baggy. 2 swords were on either side of her waist. They resembled a cross between a samurai sword and a Western-style rapier. She was built for speed, not power. She had silver flowing hair and red eyes, which only hinted at the crazed bloodlust beneath the serene exterior. All right, Uzumaki, what's the big idea dragging us out here without even an explanation? Hidetada spoke, his expression showing his annoyance and resentment for the young man that called himself his commander. Naruto let the branch fall back to its natural position as he turned to the ninja. He once again let his eyes scan over the group before he spoke. It has recently become known to me that the Mizukage has grown alarmed with the number of ninja he has lost over the last 14 days, therefore he has decided to go and request Kumo for aid in disposing of you. He will be passing by this route with a team 30 to 40 Umbu as his personal guard. We are here to make sure he does not reach his destination. 30 to 40 Umbu, the coward would leave his people naked and unguarded? Guan spoke from his place on one of the tree branches. Shino adjusted his glasses into place. While he had no delusions that he could take on a fully trained Umbu head-on, his role was much more support than anything. His Kikaichu were already on 2 of the Umbu that were approaching, and were already absorbing minuscule amounts of chakra. By the time they actually arrived, those 2 Umbu would have already lost 1/15 of their chakra by his estimation. The rest of his hive was here with him, ready to be unleashed once the battle began. What is the plan? The plan is simple. We will divide the troops in 2 groups of 15. Hinata and Mika will lead one, while Guan and Shino lead another. You will herd the Mizukage in my direction, where Jinchiko, Hidetada and myself will ambush him. The 2 aforementioned members of the 7 swordsmen exchanged a glance which clearly said, "This is our chance." Of course, that would be so much easier if he wasn't planning their downfall as well. He spared a glance to Shino and Hinata, and then to a hidden spot in the forest where Kakashi and Kurenai were hiding under his orders. The 2 of them were to guard both Hinata and Shino respectively. They were only to interfere if they truly believed one of them was about to die. While he couldn't afford to have either one of them die, he also couldn't afford to have them appear as if they needed babysitting. Kakashi had reported that the training he had given Hinata throughout the 2 weeks he had given her before he undertook this mission, that she was at a level of mid-chunin without the Byakugan. With it, she was high chunin to possibly even low jounin. Shino's physical abilities placed him to low chunin already. With his intellect added to it, he was probably mid-chunin, but he couldn't be sure. Guan was easily above both of them in skill. His apprentice Mika, however, from what he could sense, was relatively at the same level, but from the reports of her blood-crazed induced state when she entered a battle could make her very unpredictable, thus very dangerous. Hinata spoke. But how can you be certain the Mizukage will flee instead of fight? If the first group attacks and the Mizukage decides to fight them himself, then the first group will easily be destroyed? From the reports I've received, the Mizukage is not one for bravery or camaraderie. The chances that he chooses to fight the first group head-on, especially in ambush, are much lower than the chance that he will instead attempt to flee towards either safety or to the borders of Kumo. Either way we will manage to catch him, or reduce his forces significantly. His eyes snapped towards Hidetada and Jinchiko, as the 2 again shared a look. You have your orders. Get to your positions. Tsunade silently sat in the corner of her hotel room, sake bottle firmly in hand. Her thoughts were in turmoil, and had been so for the past few days or so. Jiraiya's words still echoed in her mind. No matter how many treaties, agreements, alliances and policies we make, they are a fragile alliance at best, which breaks almost every 2 decades and more innocents are lost. But this is something that can bring peace for far longer than just some signed treaty. His argument had merit. It was true that no matter how many peace agreements and signings the villages made between each other, this spiral of war was never ending. But could he do it? Could he truly bring peace to the world? It was a dream at best and a delusion at worst. And even if he could, just how many more people would he have to destroy in order to do so? How many deaths can be justified with this ambition? Hundreds? Thousands? Millions? And what if he failed? Would it all have been for nothing? Would all the rivers of blood and tears all be for a simple delusion that would simply throw this chaotic world into an even darker abyss of death and war? What justification could he have then? Just think of it, Tsunade. No one will ever again have to go through what you went through with Nawaki and Dan. Her former teammates' words again reached her, and she scowled, remembering how much both herself and her parents had cried when Nawaki died, and then the feeling of cold solitude when Dan had left. It hadn't been fair, and she grew to hate the world for it. Could she save others from such a thing if she did this? Tsunade-sama? A hesitant voice reached her ears. What are you doing sitting in the dark? Tsunade was snapped out of her thoughts at the second sentence. It's dark? Dark? She questioned as she blinked, noticing that indeed the sun had already gone down, bathing the room in its inky blackness. Akina stood at the doorway with some groceries in hand. Where's Shizune? Tsunade questioned as the girl closed the door with her foot. The young blonde shrugged. Don't know, we were on our way up here when she suddenly handed me everything and mumbled something about leading some debt collectors away. Tsunade blushed slightly, realizing that Shizune had, again, saved her from the debt collectors. She watched as the blonde girl placed the overstuffed bag on the table and began putting things inside of the mini fridge. She had recovered remarkably well from her injuries throughout the last month or so since they found her, and these last 2 weeks now Shizune oftentimes had to go and find her to make sure she didn't strain herself too much while training. After a few moments, Akina began to notice the tense aura surrounding Tsunade and turned to face her. Is something wrong? She asked, genuinely curious, with even what was considered a hint of worry in her voice. Tsunade was quiet for a moment before she finally stated. I spoke to Jiraiya a while back. The younger girl tensed, her back going ramrod straight as she turned to face her. Her expression was hesitant and worried. Since she didn't know exactly what to say, she nearly kept quiet, waiting for Tsunade to continue. Seeing that she wouldn't speak, Tsunade decided to continue. He came to offer me a place in Konoha again. The young girl turned her gaze away from the last Sannin. She leaned over the table. I see, she said uncertainly. After a moment she seemed to gather herself, her hunched form straightening out as she once again turned to face the slug princess. Will you accept? She bit her lower lip slightly as she waited for Tsunade's answer. Tsunade drank some more sake, leaned back in her chair, and looked at her dead in the eye. What will you do if I say I will? Guan sat in a tree, holding his broadsword across his chest as he waited, half-heartedly tracing a stone over the edges. Shino sat nearby, focusing his chakra and preparing his Kikaichu for battle. Guan looked at the young Aburame, as if sizing him up. Finally, after a moment or so, he spoke. I have heard that you volunteered for this mission, young Genin. He stated evenly. Shino turned his head to face him. Yes, I did. Guan made a HN sound as he traced the stone over his sword again. Why would a Genin such as yourself volunteer for a mission like this? It would be considered suicidal. So, either you are very arrogant or have another reason altogether for doing this. Shino pushed his sunglasses back into position before speaking. Indeed, I did, but my reasons are my own and are no concern of yours, with all due respect. He added as an afterthought. Guan smirked. Indeed, it is not. Very well then, Genin, keep your secrets. For the battle is about to begin. As he spoke, he stood and examined his sword. Shino looked to the distance and indeed noticed faint movement beyond the trees. It looks as if they've arrived. Hinata sighed tiredly, if a bit irritated, as Mika's cheerful humming continued to reach her ears, thus grating on her nerves and thinning patience. She turned her head to the girl, letting her irritation clearly show on her face. Will you cut that out? She snapped after a second or two. It's annoying. Mika let her hand trace over the bark of the tree she was standing on before turning her blood-red eyes onto the Hyuga clan head. Oh, so my singing is annoying to you, is it? She smiled, somewhere between a friendly smile and a malicious one. She unsheathed one of her swords and pointed it at her throat. Well, guess what? Your pretty little face and stupid white eyes are annoying me. So how about I carve those out? After all, you're the only leaf ninja here. I could easily kill you and then say that you died in battle. From his place in a nearby tree, Kakashi let his eyes travel to his young student. I wonder if you can handle this, Hinata. Hinata for her part did realize the precarious situation she was in, especially when she heard the mutters that spread through the rest of the ninja in their company. She caught a sliver of movement from the corner of her eye. She flared her Byakugan for a moment and caught sight of their targets approaching them. She deactivated her bloodline and looked at the silver-haired girl, her face betraying no expression. "We don't have time for this." "We have plenty of time, Miss Hyuga Heiress," Mika replied, her smile growing as she took a step forward. Hinata stomped down the urge to step back and held her ground stubbornly. Glaring at the girl, she spoke again, her voice cold and clipped. "Our targets are approaching, so either make your move, you stupid Kiri bitch, or back off." The tension between the two at that moment grew so heavy and thick that one could cut it with a blunt knife. From his perch in the tree, Kakashi raised both eyebrows in surprise. Either she's got a death wish, or she is officially the luckiest person on earth. Finally, after almost a full minute of the glaring contest, Mika smirked and lowered her weapon. "Fine then, leaf bitch, I'll deal with you later." Just as she finished speaking, the allied group of Kiri ninja of the other team could be heard as their battle cries reached their ears. Hinata and Akina shared a glance before both leapt away. Naruto observed as the two teams engaged the Mizuki's escort group. But what none of the Kiri ninja knew was that it wasn't 30 Umbu the Mizuki had brought with him, but 45. The Mizuki figured that there was a leak in their information network, so in an attempt to lure the leaders of the rebellion, namely Jinchiko, Hidetada, or Guan, into a trap, he spread information that he would be leaving to Kumo with an entourage of 30 men, and then informed his most loyal Umbu to take another team to hang back and only strike when he confronted either Guan, Hidetada, or Jinchiko personally. Even now he could sense them at the edges of his perceptions. They were indeed masters of silent killing. So, all he needed to do was wait for the Mizuki to retreat. The Mizuki's plan was to lure whoever was leading the attack away from the main group, and then ambush him or her with the 15 or so Umbu. The 15 Umbu that would descend on Jinchiko and Hidetada, if all went well. Right on cue, he saw the blue-robed figure break through one of the lines and rush into the forest, apparently panicked. He spoke into his radio. "Jinchiko, he is heading in your direction. Hidetada, head to Jinchiko's position, we will ambush him there." "Copy." "Very well." Naruto put his radio away and rushed after the Mizuki. "Breakthrough. We must protect Yondaime-sama." One of the Kiri Umbu yelled as he moved to rush after the Mizuki. Before he could leap, however, a green blur flashed before his eyes before a terrible burning pain tore through his stomach, and he hit the floor, his vision fading into cold darkness. The other Umbu all skidded to a stop as the looming form of Guan stood before them, his large broadsword glinting in the light, crimson liquid running down the edge, dripping, drops which fell to the grassy floor, staining the earth. "Not one soul shall pass here." He raised his sword and stabbed it hilt deep into the earth, forming a line. Pulling it back out, he spun it once over his head before swinging it over the earth directly in front of him. Huge spears of mud exploded from the ground and impaled two of the ninja that were caught off guard by the maneuver, while the others leapt back, avoiding the assault. He leveled his blade at them. "Those who dare shall meet death." Kakashi watched as Hinata was cornered by two of the Kiri Umbu. He was ready to step in at a moment's notice, but his orders were specifically to interfere only if it was absolutely necessary. Besides, she had been handling herself remarkably well, using hit-and-run tactics and long-range kunai throwing to injure and weaken some of the opposing Nins. Her Juken had even caught one of them completely off guard, catching him in the right lung and effectively, well, killing him really. He was wondering how she was going to get out of this one. "Hey, look at this one, Ujimasa, it's just a kid." One of them laughed as he looked at his partner. "I bet she'll kick your ass, eh?" The other one, Ujimasa, sneered at his partner. "Fuck you, Kojiro." As he spoke, he stepped forward, ready to run the Hyuga heiress through with his Umbu blade. Hinata smirked before she began spinning. "Kaiten." "What?" One of the Umbu yelled before the spinning barrier hit them both, pushing them away with great force. They both skidded to a stop as Hinata ceased her spinning. They scrambled to their feet, both thoroughly pissed. Now Hinata was worried. That was a delay tactic and she knew it. There was no way in hell she could beat two Umbu head-on. Hell, there was no way she could beat one head-on. She had to find a way out of this. Alas, her worrying was for naught. As the two Umbu began to stand, two wickedly curved blades impaled both of them. entering through the back of their neck and coming out through the front. Hinata looked to her savior and found Mika, with a twisted smile on her face and madness shining in her red eyes. He, I told you we'd settle this later, princess. Hinata, though worried, again refused to show it. Instead, she smirked. Do you really think you can beat me? If so, then you're dumber than you look. Mika licked some of the blood off of her swords and laughed. We'll just have to find out then, won't we? Before Hinata could say anything else, the Kiri Kunoichi rushed forward swinging her swords in an attempt to cleave her in half. Hinata leaped up, and over her, somersaulting, she landed behind the silver-haired girl and turned on her heel, ready to use a juken strike to her spine. Mika swiveled around, on her heel and swatted her hand away with her left forearm, and then swung at her midsection with the sword in her right hand. Hinata backpedaled, narrowly avoiding the attack. As soon as her feet touched the floor again, however, her Byakugan flared to life, the veins around her eyes became more exposed as she naturally settled herself into the juken stance. She was going to set this lunatic straight right now. The Mizukage was rushing through the trees of the forest surrounding Kiri. As he leapt for another tree branch, he barely managed to twist himself in mid-air in time as a surge of lightning passed right next to him. He growled as he stuck upside down to a branch using chakra. He looked to the forest floor and smirked as he saw his attacker. Jinchiko, he spoke her name with a sneering tone as the white-robed Kunoichi leveled one of her blades at him. Yandame-sama. She spoke in a calm tone as yellow streaks of lightning danced over her two short swords. Foolish girl, why don't you step aside and let me pass? You know you could never defeat me on your own. And who says she's by herself? A voice spoke up to his right as Hidetada emerged from behind a tree. The Mizukage's eyes narrowed at the sight of another one of his hated enemies. Ah, Hidetada, now all of us are here. Not quite. Jinchiko spoke up. Our other friend has yet to arrive. Hidetada finished. The Mizukage snorted. You mean Guan, that imbecile is still fighting the fools I left behind in the clearing, he won't be coming. Oh, we're not talking about Guan. Hidetada said calmly before he looked to the right. Ah, here he comes now. The Mizukage snapped his head in the same direction, watching as a red-robed figure appeared from the shadows of the forests. And who would this be? He sneered at the unexpected arrival, before finally catching sight of the leaf headband on his arm. Konoha? He breathed in an astonished voice. Before snapping his head back to Jinchiko. You got help from Konoha? Jinchiko smirked at his shocked expression. Indeed, we did, you worthless cunt, and now is the time you die. His lips curled back in a snarl. No, Jinchiko, this is where you die. He raised his hand and brought it down, and the 15 hidden umbu leapt down to the forest floor, 5 of them surrounding Jinchiko, 5 of them surrounding Naruto, and 5 surrounding Hidetada, surprising 2 of the 3. Welcome to your funeral. Beneath his hood and mask, Naruto's smile was lost. Jiraiya slowly parted the blinds over the entrance to the bar as he entered. He didn't pause to spare any of the patrons a second glance, instead choosing to head directly for the person he had come to see. Tsunade let her eyes follow him as he entered, her cup pausing on its path to her lips as she waited for him to join her. Finally, as he loomed over her, he spoke. Have you made your decision? She placed the cup down on the table, calmly ordering the bill before she spoke. Yes. And? A pause before finally. I'll meet with him. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.